politics of fear and hate are wrong. We love you and politics of compassion
But America,
and love are right.
we are not going back.
Hey, y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Raised Red Living Blue podcast. I'm your host, Jason Will. We're going to be doing another solo episode today, and we've got a lot to unpack. If you are not living under a rock, then you are well aware that there is just an ever-evolving news cycle of really disturbing things that are taking place. Things that are weakening our democracy, weakening our moral high ground around the entire globe. You know, people are getting hurt. People are disappearing off the streets. People are being sent to countries that are not of their origin. People are being sent to like horrible prisons in other countries, detention centers. We've already had detention centers that have had to be closed. But we've had this, I would think, this perfect storm building around ICE and the efforts of Kristi Noem, Tom Homan with DHS. You know, Tom Homan's our border czar, Kristi Noem, Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. The ineptness of her, the lack of qualifications of the entire clown cabinet, where Kristi Noem is one of the front runners as being just totally out of her league, out of her element in that position. We've just seen, and those of us who are at the adult table and who can see things for what they really are and are in this space of reality, like we are interpreting what we are seeing, what we are hearing, what we are reading through an objective lens. So we are not just getting talking points from the head of our party, right? We are actually interpreting respected investigative journalists. We are respecting their reporting and then forming our own opinions based on multiple articles and reporting from different journalists, different news outlets, but also audio. All right, so like original audio, raw, uncut video. We're able to use all of this in a comprehensive way to come up with decisions, beliefs, outlooks, stances. Where do we stand on these issues? For those of us who have been taking this seriously and not just labeling the Democrats and the leftists and the progressives in the country as these evil, America-hating radicals, right, as we have been painted. So you've got President Trump, the MAGA leadership, directing the MAGA base to hate us, to not trust us, to despise us, that we're the problem. And it's no matter whether you're a Democrat who is wearing a uniform, a police officer's uniform, a military uniform, a first responder's uniform, a nurse's uniform, whether you've got a heavily decorated chest of medals from your service in the military. If you are a Democrat, if you are a liberal, if you are a progressive, you are the enemy, right? That's the reality of what we're doing here. But the base comes up with that, you know, that identity for the left based on what they are told, based on the feelings and opinions of their cult leaders, not the reality of that situation, okay? It's not fair to say that my neighbor, who is a retired Marine, who was willing to put his life on the line for the country and is a staunch Democrat, it is unfair to label him as less of an American, much less an evil person based on his party affiliation, okay? So there's the difference, right? The problem is that what I see from the trolls and the MAGA loyalists and the bots and whoever all these freaking people are, and we're going to focus on a real person today. Dale Jackson, a conservative talk radio host and news commentator in Alabama. He has a weekday political talk program on News Talk 770 AM, 92.5 FM, WVNN, where he discusses local and national politics and offers conservative perspectives, okay? I have been following this guy for some time. I have been a troll, a rage baiter on his content because it's false, because it's BS, because it's not rooted in fact. It's rooted in opinion, it's rooted in feelings, and it's rooted in, things that his fellow conservative commentators are using, the talking points they're using, and much of those talking points come from the MAGA White House, okay, and the minions therein. So I've been following Mr. Jackson for quite some time and challenging his content pretty harshly in some cases, just because I get unhinged when I read it, because it's just full of shit. Most of it is just garbage, right? Absolute garbage. So we're going to go through a number of his posts and just take them one post at a time and fact check them, okay? So we're going to stick with the big ones here, the big topics of the day, the biggest of which, the murder of Renee Good in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Just how his response to that, we'll see. You'll make your own judgments at home, but in my opinion, they lack empathy, right? They lack a basis of fact. It's not honest reporting that he's doing. He is reporting in such a way that I can only assume that the goal here is to overshadow how bad of a president Donald Trump actually is. How many mistakes not only he is making, the crazy batshit things he's saying and doing, but it's also the clown cabinet and how they're making us less safe, less healthy, less financially secure, less respected around the world. And I know the MAGA base is like, their whole, response to this is just like, fuck everybody. Fuck the EU. It's all about America and to hell with everybody else. Whereas if you've been following this show, you'll hear me say this a lot, that, the world has really become a global community, a global society, and it 100% is a global economy. So when America was experiencing inflation, this is just an example, right? So what the right does is they want to play the blame game, right? So it's always Biden's fault. Anybody notice that? It's Obama's fault. Obama hasn't been in office for many years, but everything's still his fault and still Biden's fault. None of it is any of the Republican president's fault, even though if you look at the records, and this is what it just really gripes my ass. I really want to be like, I've had it with fucking Dale Jackson, and I've had it with Donald Trump, and I've had it with ICE. But I want to not, plagiarize from the I've Had It podcast. So around here, started with Sloan, I'm kind of carrying it on, is the griping of the ass. All right. And so there's so many things that gripe my ass. But when they talk about things like inflation and they place the blame solely on Biden, and what Trump wanted you to believe is that when he came into office, that he was going to be able to fix inflation with the flip of a light switch. I mean, that's how easy he made it sound, like, oh, all these day one promises, right? And so what he found, maybe what he discovered, self-discovered, because he doesn't have any people around him that are actually giving him solid advice on how to govern and how to architect these economic policies that will actually improve the economy. All he's got is the blame game and things like tariff policies that are ever changing. There's no consistency in the marketplace. There's no way for people to plan based off of concrete decisions. It's the flip-flopping. It's the taco, the chickening out of the raising tariffs and things like that, and how he's going to impose the tariffs, what level they're going to be imposed. The ever-changing policies out of the White House have created chaos in the economy, right? And there's a lot of things that just come down to common sense, okay? But it's just so hard not to just get bogged down in the minutia of all this bullshit. But just looking at inflation, the level of inflation that we felt here in the US was a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And what MAGA would want you to believe is that the COVID-19 pandemic was a hoax, that COVID-19 is just a little bit more dangerous than the flu, and it was nothing to really worry about. And, the Democrats made a mountain out of a molehill and, caused everybody to wear these masks and, quarantine, and everybody's quality of life went to hell in a handbasket, and inflation got out of control, and it's just all Biden's fault. But simultaneously, these same things were happening in other countries. Other countries were feeling inflation the same time we were. Other countries, if you just turn on the news, I can remember just seeing all the body bags, that were being presented to us on our televisions from Italy, right? And you're like, holy crap, look at all these people dying in every country, and dying in massive numbers in just about every country. We didn't know how to handle it. We didn't know the best way to handle it. In the event of a pandemic where you are in uncharted territory and you don't know how to handle it, the best case scenario is to take every precaution. Every precaution. All right? So if Biden was responsible, is Biden, question to MAGA here, leave it in the comments, your answer. Is Biden responsible for the inflation that took place all over the globe or just in America? Was the COVID-19 that was in America, was that a hoax? Was that just like a severe flu? But the COVID-19 all around the globe, where we saw all these people being loaded into all these body bags being loaded into the back of these big trucks and hauled off to these big storage coolers. Did they have a different COVID-19 than we had? I'm just trying to understand it, right? I want to understand it. So that's just an example. I don't think we're going to talk about inflation anymore today. We're going to talk about ICE. We're going to talk about Venezuela, and probably stick to those two talking points, because those seem to be like pretty front and center right now. Inflation's getting under control. There's some good news there. But now we have all this other stuff that's just happening. And I just feel like with every day that goes by, and the more that Trump gets away with, the more rope we give him, the more miles of it he takes, right? He's getting more and more emboldened with every day that passes. And, there's just no guardrails. And we're seeing more and more of it happen in the light of day. I do get pissed off when I see your content, Dale, and I am going to challenge you, and I am going to do it angrily, but I'm going to get over it, right? You're not ruining my life. You may ruin a brief moment of my day, but what brings me peace is that this is a house of cards, right? I know for a fact that y'all don't have any proof that January 6th was a deep state coup. I mean, one of the problems with Dale, he thinks Tuberville is smart. One of the problems with a lot of these MAGA people is they think like Trump is just like one step ahead of everybody. But I just know it's all bullshit. They can never bring receipts that show what they're talking about is actually factual. All right, so we're going to unpack it. But before we do, I want to give you some other facts about Dale, because he has been in Alabama, in the radio space in Alabama for years, and he calls himself this. I want to make sure I clarify that. He calls himself, nobody else came up with this. He is a self-proclaimed Alabama's most trusted journalist. Okay, so to be Alabama's most trusted journalist, it would seem to me that your reporting, your commentary, your dialogue, what you're saying, what you're writing in text, what you're putting out there in graphics would have a basis, would be rooted in some semblance of fact. But as we go through these posts, we're not going to see that. We're not going to see that. We're going to see commentary, reporting, broadcasting that is based off of opinion, right-wing talking points. That's it. I mean, and just the overall belief that everybody on my team is evil and deserves to die, does not deserve to be American, because we ultimately want to destroy America. That's what they think. You know, that's where we are as a society. And after this week, you know, I've always had this hope that the more crazy Trump acts and speaks during the second term, the more his approval rating plummets, the more kind of forced into the middle. The majority of the left and the right will just be forced to the table in the middle and be forced to reconcile a lot of our differences, be forced to admit things. I mean, the left has a lot of things that they need to admit that they let go too far. All right? And now we're seeing this. What we're seeing is that at the very least, we need a two-party system. What the Republicans want is a one-party system. Okay? Now there may be more than one political party, but there is never going to be. This is their goal. This is their dream. This is their desire, their goal, that their party is the ruling party. All these other parties are just a bunch of politicians in name only, right? They don't have a whole lot of influence. You know, they make people back home in their districts that they serve feel better because they feel like they got somebody representing them. But the reality is these people are getting locked out of meetings on committees that they're a part of, committees they chair or co-chair. They are the daily briefings, intelligence briefings are being withheld from people that are elected to these Democratic seats. And gosh, is it is it getting off the rails? I just feel like, gosh, I was dead wrong. I had a core group of my Democratic friends that said, Jason, this is heading toward, like, your positivity, your optimism is misdirected. Like, you know, give me a pat on the back. I'm glad you've still got some hope, but we don't have any hope because this shit is gonna get just nuts. We're headed to true authoritarianism. And after this week, gosh, it just seems like we're headed for way more violence in the country. We are headed for, you know, way more weeks like we've had this week, where, you know, there's going to be way more protests. There's going to be way more protesters that are killed in self-defense. And who knows where that's going to lead. And the crazy thing is that the more we resist and the more like angry, hostile we get, you know, if we get really pissed off, if they kill more people, and as a result of them killing more people, you know, we burn something. We burn some cars, we burn some buildings, you know, there's some rioting, I don't know. It just feeds the narrative. See, look at them. They hate America. You can't love America and light the flag on fire. You can't love America and set fire to a small business owner's livelihood. That's just un-American. I would firmly disagree with that, because when people see something they love being destroyed, they're going to fight for it. That's just the natural thing. It's like we want to blame all these people in prison because they weren't able to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. They weren't able to pull themselves up out of abject poverty. They weren't able to suck it up and go a couple days without eating, or in order to eat, they sucked it up and didn't steal food. They just went hungry until, they found some for free, or, they just found the work ethic to pull up those bootstraps and earn the money to do it, right? But if you're a kid who's in high school, who's hungry, you don't give a shit about your grades. You give a shit about the hunger pains. And if you know you don't have any money and somebody offers you some crack cocaine or some meth to smoke, take your mind off of it, you're probably going to do it. And then you got to feed the addiction so that you can continue to numb the pain, but also feed the addiction. And you don't have any money, so you got to steal it. Whereas if we just could take care of these people to where they don't have to worry about where their next meal will come from, maybe they wouldn't steal somebody's car or steal their lunch money, break into somebody's house, shoplift, and get arrested. But that's what they want, because the more people that are incarcerated, the more money they make, because prison's got to be a private sector boom in terms of being a moneymaker. So to me, I know I'm kind of all over the place here, but how in the world do you stay focused when there is so much chaos going on in today's society? All right, so what we're going to do is today, my goal is to just really destroy this title that Dale has given himself of Alabama's most trusted journalist. And before we do that, I just want to bring up the fact that Dale Jackson faced a suspension in 2009. He was then a talk show host on WVNN in Huntsville. He posted a fake news release on the station's website and read it on air, claiming that election day had been changed so the Republicans would vote on Tuesday and the Democrats on Wednesday, using the Alabama state seal in the document. This was framed as satire, but the Alabama elections officials and the state attorney general said the unauthorized use of the state seal violated state law. Jackson was thereby suspended from the on-air activities of the week without pay by the station. There was talk of possible felony investigation because the seal could mislead people about official election information. Jackson later acknowledged he shouldn't have used the seal, saying he thought it was clearly a joke. All right. What's not a joke is how impressionable the MAGA base is. All right. This is pre-MAGA. So it's just Republicans. All right. And Republicans pre-MAGA have been conditioned since the 1950s, 60s, and 70s to buy into Republican policies because it's the way out. Republican policy is the way out. It is the way to the promised land, to the promised life, to being among the upper middle class and beyond, right? You're not going to get out of your trailer, your rundown trailer, being a Democrat. You got to be a Republican. All right, so they did a fantastic job of brainwashing these people to get them to vote against their own interests and support political candidates that didn't have their best interest in mind. that only wanted to serve their pockets, their bank accounts, the bank accounts of their cronies, the bank accounts of the businesses that the lobbyists work for. You know, it's all just about the aristocracy and the transfer of wealth from young to old, from poor to rich. That's what it's all about. That's what it's always been about. And so they've gotten these people to vote against their own interests and turn their back. They've gotten working class people to turn their back on working class politicians. Okay? And I talked about the multiple party system, but we're seeing why, a clear indication of why and how one party in power for too long is not good. So we 100% need two parties at a minimum. And we need to figure out why it is impossible or has been difficult to the point of, not being able to take these third parties seriously. They never gain any traction. All the money is with these two parties and it's not serving us.
Hey, fellow Blue Dots, we would love for you to connect with us on social media. We're on Instagram and TikTok at Raised Red Living Blue. Okay, back to the episode.
The thing about Dale, Sean Hannity, Jesse Waters, these guys are not serious journalists. They're entertainers. They like to be part of a clique. They like to be part of the in crowd. They like to be popular. They like to get attention from people. And so, they don't seem to really care whether they have to lie or do some shady shit in order to, gain membership, gain access to these people, and then eventual membership into their cult. And then all the lying and misinformation that they have to not only internalize, then believe, establish their basis of fact from this bullshit. And then they need to communicate it to the marketplace, right? They need to promote it. They need to go out here on all these different news feeds and find political commentary that goes against what is being talked about and preached within the cult and challenge it. All right. This is a profit motive too, because this is like the politics of fear. That's what gets attention, right? Fear, controversy, animosity, violence, war, sticking it to people, right? Owning the libs. Like, that's what it's all about. And for a lot of people, it I think is a multifaceted thing. They get into the in crowd, they get into what they feel like is their clique, and they gain, fame, they get lots of attention from people, and maybe they get a powerful political position in a clown cabinet, or they get, a major endorsement, or something happens. There's a financial, there is a career advancement goal here. There's something that they are selling themselves out, selling out their own integrity, selling out their own principles, their own morality to gain something that they think that they want. But what that's not going to do long term is it's not going to help their legacy. It's not going to help eventually their self-esteem. And for some of these people, it may not help their ability to be free once the adults are back in charge. All right? And I didn't really say this in the first segment, but I really feel like if we keep going down this path, it's a situation where elections may not fix this. I mean, we've already seen them doing everything they can to rig elections. We've seen the Democrats, position themselves in the states where it's happening, Texas, California, to combat this. You're going to draw your lines bigger over here. We're going to circle our bigger piece of the pie over here. Florida is next. Ron DeSantis is about to create some more seats for Republicans. So we've already seen that. before this week, I really thought maybe it would be a democratic process that brought some resolution to this. And if we have, I don't know if I'm ready to do it right now, but if we have more weeks ahead of us like we've had this week, we're going to have to take it by force. This is not going to be a peaceful transfer of power. We're going to need some people in the military to go, nope, not taking that order. And you're not taking me away from my post. You're not taking away my command. You can't take away my command based on the fact that I don't want to follow or I refuse to follow an illegal order. Like, we need some people of power and influence, particularly on the right, to go, nope, this is a bridge too far. And we're starting to see it. We've started to see the cracks in the MAGA base, and people like Dale Jackson will create content that argues that the crack in the MAGA base, all the rifts and all the infighting is BS. It's untrue. It's just liberal propaganda. I mean, a lot of this stuff is happening like in the light of day now. And so they can't hide it. You know, we don't need to go behind closed doors and see Scott Bessent punch Elon Musk's smug ass in the face to go, damn, they got some problems over there. We don't need that. We've got plenty of it out in the open to see. Well, I wanted to just give you this little tidbit before we dive into this first post on Maduro, but Dale invited me to come on his radio show. I asked to come on his radio show in comments. I didn't know if he read his comments. Now I know he does read his comments, which makes me want to comment more. Eventually, I'll probably get blocked by Dale. I've gotten blocked by 1819 News. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm blocked yet by Yellowhammer News, but it seems like some people are starting to block me. But there's workarounds to that, so we'll see. But gosh, I know, like, I personally, like, my mental health would be a lot better shape if I just went ahead and blocked Dale Jackson myself. But somebody's got to stand up to these assholes. And after the 2024 election, I was like, shit, enough is enough. Enough is enough. I may be a nobody. I may not have a big following. I may not have a big microphone. I may not even have a soapbox I can stand on. But I've got this. I've got this camera. I've got the internet. I've got social media. I've got just as much as some of these other folks have. And it started out, this whole journey started out for Sloan and I as just a way to, you know, it was cathartic to get our frustrations out on air and just to voice them. Like, we didn't even know if anybody was going to ever listen to this show. We didn't really care. You know, it was fun to sit down in her basement, you know, once a week and record an episode and go, God dang, can you believe the dumb shit they said and did this week? Like, how is MAGA still putting their faith behind these people? How do women for Trump actually do it? I mean, and we're going to, I have got a stellar Facebook response that I'm going to read on air to show you just how deplorable the women can be. You know, white men have always wanted to do whatever it takes, step on whoever's neck they could to gain power, to gain wealth, and then to retain those two things. Women are, I just think, just in their DNA, like genetically, they're just better humans, or that's their design. You know, they're able, based on a lot of different factors, the way in which their brain forms, the time, the shorter time it takes a woman's brain to develop than a man's. You see the realities of that play out from, you know, toddler all the way up to grown adult. But to see these women go, gosh, you know, I really respect a president who loves to grab women by the pussy. I really respect a male president that calls women pigs and dogs and calls them stupid. It just makes no sense. I'm a woman female Trump supporter, and I just love the fact that he's been so unfaithful to all of his wives. You know, I have heard all these things about younger girls and beauty pageants and philandering and prostitutes. I either think all of that is leftist bullshit, leftist propaganda, or I am okay with it because Trump has been chosen by God and God has chosen a lot of very bad people to do his work throughout history. However you justify it, it just kind of blows my mind that you can, at the end of the day, be somebody who feels like they are a Christ follower, and how that would even remotely, not justify, but, you know, just, it would just be okay to be a Trump supporter and be a devout Christian or Christ follower at the same time, given what we're seeing here with the cruelty and all this stuff. I mean, we got people that have crosses and stuff in their bios on their social media handles talking about how big of a Christian you are. And I think if you've got to proclaim it like that, maybe there's a sign there that something's off. But they got these big, you know, posts on their pages and in their feeds of just how over the top in love they are with God and how big of a servant they are for him. And then when something like the Renee Good story pops up, it's hashtag fuck around and find out. No, it doesn't go that way. And I would just, you know, I would love, because it's not only Dale Jackson, but I think the reason Dale Jackson makes this episode just easier, because I mean, Tommy Tuberville has pissed me off this week. I mean, he pisses me off every week. Katie Britt has done a lot to piss me off this week. Her blaming Renee Good's murder on leftist rhetoric. I mean, what the fuck is she talking about? But all Dale Jackson does is they're all taking the same talking points. So to me, why not we just pick on the most trusted journalist in Alabama, the self-described most trusted journalist in Alabama, who just puts up posts very consistently. Let's see, January 3rd, 12:31 p.m., and then he posted again at 2:16 p.m. on January 3rd, and at 2:30 p.m. on January 3rd, and then 9:50 p.m. on January 3rd. You know, so he's making multiple posts a day and just giving me tons of ammunition. I'm not even sure if this is the best post to use on Maduro, but, you know, for the sake of time, we got to get through this. Dale wrote on January 3rd at 12:31 p.m., the media and their Democrats will rage for the next few days about how illegal bombing Venezuela and arresting their president is. Are they right? Of course not, Dale says. All right, so let's fact check this and unpack it in a much more responsible way. Let's first do it by breaking down what actually happened, okay? So on January 3rd, 2026, the United States did launch a military operation in Venezuela that included airstrikes and the capture of Maduro, President Maduro, and his wife, all right? Maduro and his wife were then flown to the U.S. to face federal criminal charges. The operation has drawn widespread international criticism. All right, so if this was such a great thing for Venezuela, such a great thing for the Venezuelan people, such a good thing for the world, why is there widespread international criticism, including from the United Nations Human Rights Office? And multiple countries have pointed to this as it being a violation of international law and sovereignty. All right, so let's go back to Dale's post. He said the media, and he didn't say whether it was the U.S. media, but you got to assume that's what he meant, because he said the media and their Democrats will rage about how illegal these airstrikes were and how illegal this kidnapping was. But he's saying, of course it wasn't. We are just pontificating on the fact that it was because we hate Trump and we're going to hate anything that he does, no matter how good it is for the United States or Venezuela or the world. And it's just not true, okay? Even U.S. lawmakers, including Democrats like Kamala Harris, have said that this action is unlawful and unwise. So politicians from both sides of the aisle are expressing concerns about this. All right. And the fact that they're expressing concerns and they're not totally adamant about their opposition for this is what's been shared with them. Who is this information been shared with, and to what extent? To what extent have U.S. lawmakers, especially Democrats, have they been included enough in the information to make a determination of whether this was lawful or unwise, or whether it was one of the greatest moves in not only American history but world history? But criticizing the legality and the wisdom of this U.S. military operation is not the same as defending Maduro or Iran or anybody else. You know, you see people, I just see the most disturbing memes. Like, you know, a lot of people seem to feel like George Floyd deserved to die. Like his whole I can't breathe thing, I just can't, you know, if I had a nickel for all these memes and comments I've seen disparaging George Floyd and making fun of his statement that he could not breathe. George Floyd was not a saint, but he didn't deserve to die. Renee Good, I don't know if she was a saint or not. Was she obstructing an investigation or federal operation? I can't say for sure. All I can say for sure is that I don't believe the force that was used was warranted. I don't believe that her being shot in the face was an appropriate action to be taken based on what she was doing. But it doesn't mean that I support the fact that she was filming ICE agents or had this caravan or maybe blocking the road. I mean, a lot of these facts, a lot of these Republican commentators are just really going off on some of these talking points. Like they know exactly, they have all the evidence in front of them, and they know, they've read all the eyewitness testimony. They've interviewed every ICE agent that was in earshot and eye shot of this. They just act like they have all of it, all the information, all the evidence stored in their mind, and they are making statements based off of factual evidence, which the investigation's just started. So how can that be? Until there's a conclusion to the investigation, and the conclusion to the investigation cannot be just an FBI investigation. When the FBI is run by somebody who is proven he is unqualified, untrustworthy, and unserious, just to name a few. Okay? The FBI has given the American people, the American Congress, the American Senate, plenty of reason not to trust them. Okay? All right, I'm sorry. I just, it's hard. This is very hard to get through and to get through it efficiently. What this is about is questioning whether the U.S. had legal authority and moral justification to invade a sovereign nation. All right, let's go through what many critics have come to some common ground agreement on. This is something that is supported by Republican and Democrats. These are Republicans and Democratic critics of Maduro that take serious issue with his human rights abuses, the corruption and drug trafficking allegations that exist. The fact that many Venezuelans have suffered under the authoritarian rule, Maduro, have been treated terribly. Those criticisms don't magically make aggressive military action lawful or wise, especially when given the fact that international law prohibits force against another nation's sovereignty. The UN and international rights experts say this operation undermines global stability. And I just want to say that, when you look at things through a lens of common sense, and we started down this road with the talking points and with the understanding that the administration wanted us to infer. They wanted us to come to this conclusion that this was about protecting Americans. Therefore, it is America First. It is an America First initiative because it's protecting Americans from fentanyl and cocaine that's being smuggled in to the United States from Venezuela. Well, if that was the case, many critics have made the arguments that we should have started with, or the argument we should have started with Mexico. And they're right. Because the data I've seen on the percentages of drugs that make it across the U.S. border, make it into the U.S. territories, the majority of those drugs don't come from Venezuela, especially fentanyl. It's a very small percentage. The majority of that comes from Mexico. Okay? So fast forward to present time, we're hearing less and less about the drugs. They're really not talking about the drugs anymore at all. They're talking about the oil and how that's what it's always been about. And that's what a lot of the folks on the left have been saying that's what it's about. And that's what it's really about. And they're just really not hiding from it. There is a grooming that happens here, right? There is a grooming that takes place during the campaign trail process. And then there's a grooming post-election where they're like, you know what, we got to just kind of ease everybody into this. And we got to ease them in under the guise of very reasonable circumstances and expectations and talking points like drugs are killing Americans. And these South American governments are allowing it, and they're in cahoots. I mean, you're hearing all this stuff about the genius of Rubio and Trump because Venezuela was being used by both Hamas and Hezbollah to gain leverage over the United States through like military positioning, using narcotics to kill Americans, all these different things. And I mean, you got to give it to them. It's a pretty effective strategy. But if more people don't start recognizing the signs, start recognizing the plays that are being run that they are borrowing from historical authoritarian playbooks, we're going to be in very serious trouble here. Where does it stop? Where does it end? And then how do we maintain a moral advantage over the more evil dictators? Because Trump will say, I'm not like one of those guys because I don't want to hurt anybody. Like, I don't want to deliberately hurt anybody outside of Renee Good. She was an enemy of the state, so she had to go. But as long as you are white and you're paying you're paying your taxes and you're contributing to society and you don't have to use a lot of social programs. You're not a mooch on the state. You're financially well off enough. You're good. You're going to get left alone. And this is so much of the base and so much of the Republican establishment right now that is either supporting or being complacent. They're just allowing this stuff to happen. They're not feeling this stuff. They don't recognize anything's going on because, maybe their grocery bill's a little bit higher, but it's not enough to matter to them because they've got plenty of money. And, you're always going to have more rights and more freedoms the wealthier you are in any country, really. So it's very, very scary times. But I can tell you unequivocally that there is not a single Democrat that supports Maduro. that thinks he's a great leader. I mean, this is just craziness. Here's the thing, is that this is the point that so many of us in the moderate population, let's say, are trying to get this point across, that we are not so different in the outcomes that we want. So Democrats and Republicans, I think it's fair to say that, yeah, we'd all like to see Maduro not be in charge in Venezuela. We would not want many of the leaders that are in charge of countries to be in charge. There is just a way in which you go about doing this, and it should involve the supporting of the Venezuelan population, supporting a resistance. That's the way it's always been done. And so there were so many people saying this was not an act of war, but we're seeing Congress being subverted. We're seeing these constitutional hawks just say, oh yeah, well, the Constitution is important, but it's not that important, or the Constitution is important only when it doesn't get in the way of our agenda. God, that shit is crazy, right? I mean, right? Because what we've seen is that the separation of church and state, that's a freaking joke. That we have 3 equal branches of government, that's a joke. It's all a joke. I mean, the First Amendment only applies to some people. It's like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of this stuff is great unless it gets in the way of our agenda, unless it helps the other side in some way. As long as the benefits remain with the base, then corners can be cut, things in the Constitution can be overlooked. That's just the way it is. So when critics talk about the legality, stability, regional risk, diplomatic cost, they're not supporting Maduro. They're just saying, is this the best way to go about it? Is this the best means to the end that is going to be the best for all? And gosh, I mean, I thought MAGA was against the U.S. acting like they were the global police force. And the way we've been able to, have this high moral standing in the world is that, we don't do things, or America's far from perfect, but I think the majority of the time we try to do things, take these actions, these military actions, these aggressive actions, when we have clear legal authority to do so, or we have international support, or we have congressional support, or we have the overwhelming support of the American people. None of that exists. The vast majority of Americans don't support what Trump's doing on any of this stuff, on the economy, on the way he's handling the immigration, especially things with sovereign nations like Venezuela and Greenland. So this is a very different argument. We're just like, yeah, we need to get here. We want to get to this place, but we want to do it in the right way.
Hey, fellow Blue Dots, don't forget you can find all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button, and we would love a review. Okay, now back to the episode.
What I want to do now, as we close this episode out, is reread Dale's post, and then I'm going to provide you with a more fair and balanced assessment, okay? So again, on January 7th at 2:08 p.m., Dale Jackson wrote, "The year is 2025. We all know there are cameras everywhere, and you can tell if a shoot is good almost immediately because we're all trained in high school or somewhere along the way in whether a shoot is good or not. We're all inherently crime scene investigators. I don't know where that comes from. CNN, MSNBC, and others, they could show you the video of the ICE-related shooting and call it a day if they wanted to. It was a good shoot. They know it. So they won't. They deliberately won't show you the truth. Because they want to keep the illegals here, because they hate America, and illegals are destroying America, and we don't want people that are helping us complete our mission of destroying America being deported. Or we don't want members of the resistance being able to survive. Or we don't want anybody who shoots a member of the resistance to be prosecuted because that would be unfair. Because it's the resistance that is anti-American. Okay. So let me just offer you an alternate reality, okay? Right now, the FBI is the only agency formally investigating the fatal ICE shooting of Renee Good in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Investigators there withdrew, local Minnesota investigators withdrew after being denied full access to the evidence. So there is no independent state use of force review, which is customary. Federal officials claim the agent acted in self-defense, but video and eyewitness accounts raise serious questions, and no official determination has yet been made about whether lethal force was justified. So I think if you are a responsible journalist, certainly if you're Alabama's most trusted and most important, one of their most important talk show personalities, that you would say, hey, like, I'm going to reserve my opinion based on more of the facts that are going to be coming out in the investigations, the ongoing investigations. This is a terrible travesty. Scott Jennings said, he acknowledged this is like a terrible thing, but, did this woman bring it upon herself? Dale could say that. He could say, listen, I think the woman brought it upon herself. But it can't be case closed, good shoot, nothing to see here. The only reason why we're even having this debate is because the liberals want to distort the truth. They want to distort reality so they can continue on their mission of destroying America. I just think that somebody's got to be the adult in the room. And I said this during or after the Charlie Kirk situation. I mean, you had the governor of the state of Arizona calling for calmer, more peaceful, more unifying rhetoric. And there was intimidation on the part of the Trump administration to get that governor to change his tune. Now, the most divisive rhetoric, in my opinion, comes from the top. And in order for things to get better, there needs to be better dialogue and better text in the form of these Truth Social posts or whatever, wherever it's written, whether it's an article or a social media post, from our commander-in-chief, our leader, who is supposed to be a leader for all, but has clearly said he is the leader for people that are loyal to him. That's it. You're disloyal to him, you don't support him, you apparently don't deserve to live. You don't deserve to protest. You don't deserve to dissent. You don't deserve to voice an alternate opinion. You don't really deserve any of the perks, that's for sure. Okay? I don't know. Could this be, there's so much here on his Facebook page to unpack and to challenge, and with some really strong arguments here and evidence to the contrary. There's so much here that I could just go from post to post to post going, what the hell? Like, what is this guy doing? How does he even sleep at night? I don't know a decent person that would go do this unless they had something to gain financially, whether they had something to gain in terms of their notoriety. There's something there that would cause you to step out of your humanity and just step, like literally, on the neck of an American citizen who has just been brutally murdered unlawfully. All right, so when I've done these solo episodes, I have called out folks who have made some really crazy remarks, and I'm going to do that with a couple of folks right now. It's just wild, but I'm going to get to the most outlandish comment that was made so far. I think my assumption is that woman was an older woman and maybe a little cuckoo, but this lady does not seem to be of an age where she's starting to lose her mental faculties. And this was in regard to Renee Good, and wrote on my Raised Red at Raised Red Living Blue Facebook page in response to one of the posts that I made that is challenging the events that happen in Minneapolis. These white liberal women and lesbians are part of the country's problem. Both need a stiff dick stuck in them to get them back on track. Let me read that again. These white liberal women and lesbians are part of the country's problem. Both need a stiff dick stuck in them to get them back on track. Isn't that just the most Christian thing you've heard one of these fake maggot Christians say? It really blows my mind. I mean, the thought that runs through my mind is like WWOJD. Like, what would Jesus do? Is this something like Jesus would give her a pat on the back for writing? Like, the problem with these white women and lesbians, the reason they don't support Trump's authoritarian Gestapo murders in the streets of America is because they haven't had a good stiff dicking in a while. Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on. First, Trump makes the left come out to the defense of a wife-beating, sex-trafficking, illegal immigrant. All right. So Mr. Garcia, to my knowledge, has been vindicated and released and told by a judge. He's told the Trump administration, DHS, to leave this guy the fuck alone. Has he been involved in a domestic incident with his spouse? I think that's undeniable. Does she still love her husband, forgive him, and want to be married to him and not want him to be deported to Uganda? Given a death sentence in a maximum security prison filled with the worst of the worst? Then he makes the left come to the defense of a terrorist state known as Iran. When did we come to the defense of the terrorist state? What I recall is Trump said the bombs totally destroyed. It was like mission accomplished, and it wasn't mission accomplished. Iran's still building their stuff, and Trump is now threatening more military action because the job was not finished last time. That's my understanding of it. Then Trump, he's such a genius. He makes the left come out in defense of a dictator. This Maduro dude is playing y'all like a fiddle, and it's hilarious. If Trump hear cancer, so maybe he meant cure. If Trump cures cancer, you idiots will be protesting in front of the American Cancer Society. Well, we know Trump's not going to cure cancer, much less heal cancer, because he has cut tremendous amounts of cancer research. And you've talked to these doctors, you see them on programs like 60 Minutes, when 60 Minutes has a spine, talking about how we were on the cusp of a breakthrough until we lost our funding. I'm talking less safe, less healthy, less free, less American. That's what the results are from this administration. So I replied and I said, let's fact check this line by line, because there's a lot of rhetoric packed into a few sentences here, and I think it's a bunch of bullshit. No, people criticizing Trump's policies are not defending the wife beating or sex trafficking individuals that are supposedly being deported, which I've heard that 70% of those people apprehended, deported, detained. I've heard that 70%, there's hard data that suggests that up to 70% of these people have zero criminal records. Far less criminal records than our president. If someone disputes how law enforcement handled a situation, that's not an endorsement of the criminal behavior. It's a demand for transparency, accountability, and due process. How much transparency, accountability, and due process was Renee Good given? Much less countless others. Criticizing U.S. foreign policy toward Iran does not mean people suddenly love the Iranian government or defend a terrorist state. Many folks simply don't want more war, and they think diplomacy and accountability are smarter paths. And no, opposing certain actions in Venezuela or other foreign entanglements isn't the same as defending dictators. It's about questioning the wisdom and legality of the regime change strategies that have large civilian cost and mixed historical results. And you think of a president who has learned less from history than Donald Trump. I can't. People can disagree with Trump without being played or unpatriotic, and disagreement about policy is not the same as uncritical support for foreign governments or criminals. Okay? So basically saying that a couple things can be true at once, and that Trump has proven that he can't be given a blank check, a rubber stamp. He can't be given zero reins. He can't be given more rope than he can take. That he needs oversight. That he needs accountability. And all he's got around him are these yes men and women that are just there to improve their financial status and improve their status in the pecking order, whatever it is. They've got a goal there that's selfish and self-centered and egotistical. It's not about what's good for the American people, what's good for our country, what's good for our democracy, what's good for our Constitution, what's good for our future. I mean, there's so many things that we could still unpack here to talk about the dangers of this administration, one of which being the quality of the air we breathe. I mean, Trump has been more disastrous on our environmental health, the health of our planet, that we should be good stewards for, regardless of whether global warming or climate change exists, if it doesn't. The fact is, we all need clean air. The future generations need clean air. Our kids and grandkids need clean air. They need clean water. Okay. All right, y'all. I hope this hasn't been too much of a rant-filled tirade by an unhinged progressive podcaster who is continually enraged by how irresponsible, how unserious, how unresearched, uneducated, just disconnected from reality a lot of these people are. And I told one guy the other day, I was like, you should say this stuff out loud before you type it on social media for the world to see. I mean, because you don't know whether you got a friend or a family member that's going to read that and go, man, I thought I knew you. Now I'm going to see you in a different light forever. Or it could be an employer. I mean, who knows? It could be a potential mate. It could be your current mate, your current spouse. Go, who the fuck did I marry? Who is this insensitive jerk? Who is this misogynistic prick? And that's what MAGA is, in my opinion. It is about power, money, status, and creating this aristocratic society that is propped up by the working class that are all expendable. And that's not right. And that's not the America in which it was intended. And so much of this is happening so much faster than I thought it would. This first year was hardly anything, far from a slow roll. But make no mistake, I believe that we are being groomed just like Epstein and possibly Trump groomed those young girls that were taken advantage of, that were sexually abused. This is a large-scale grooming for us to move the needle, right, of what's socially acceptable or what is deemed within the scope of presidential power. And if more of us don't wake up, if more of us don't step out of the misinformation cult and into more of the reality of the serious adult, we're just going to see more and more of this get worse and worse and worse. All right, y'all. Hey, I got a lot of good guests coming up on the show, so stay tuned. We've got more political candidates coming on. We've got more leftist content creators that are just doing phenomenal jobs and creating content that is just so good, that makes me so proud of what they're doing. So stay tuned. And of course, if you are not following and if you've not rated the Alabama Injustice podcast, season 1, The Silencing of Jerry Lee Clark, please do that. That helps the show so much. I mean, what we're doing, the combined effort of these content creators and podcasters and YouTubers that have joined Catherine Shelton in the support of her father, Jerry Lee Clark. I mean, it has worked because Jerry Lee is sleeping in his own bed. You know, he's eating good meals. He's getting proper medical attention. And now we're going to switch gears. And the goal is accountability. First goal, release. Second goal, accountability. And we're not going to be able to do that without your support. So please follow the show and just scroll down. You'll see the stars go all the way to the 5. Click on the 5th star. It'll illuminate the other stars. Boom, voila. You have been tremendously helpful in helping this podcast reach a broader audience. Thank you so much. Again, I'm your host, Jason Will, and we'll see you soon on the next episode of Raised Red, Living Blue. I appreciate all the support, but we'll be back real soon.
Politics of fear and hate are wrong. We love you and politics of
But America,
love are right.
we are not going